Welcome to Fantasy Fanline.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another exciting week of Fantasy Fanline, the only fantasy football call-in show that puts you on the air with industry experts each and every week. I am your host, Greg Scalera. Welcome in, everybody. Welcome to mid-season. I can't believe we're here. You know, it's a long season. I feel like I've been calling it mid-season for weeks now, but this is really crunch time when you know, teams' futures start to shape up, playoff pictures start to come to light, trade deadlines are approaching. Can't think of a more important time of the year to call in and get live advice from industry experts. So that is what we're here for today. You can call in anytime during the show, 618-FANLINE. The number is up on the screen. We're here to take your trade questions, start-sit questions, waiver wire. Well, it's Saturday, so probably more like free agency in most leagues. Anything that you're on the fence about, you can give us a call, get a live consult with me and our expert guest, who we'll get to in a minute. But before that, a little bit of housekeeping. We are live right now and every Saturday for the entire season at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. You can catch us on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Twitch, wherever you want to find us. We are there for you. Please subscribe and hit the bell and follow us at Fantasy Fanline on all platforms so you know when we're on the air. You can also visit our website, fantasyfanline.com, for a full schedule of our upcoming guests and to submit a question to our mailbag. If you can't join us live, we'll be taking a few of those mailbag questions today. We got some really good ones, and I'm excited to get to them in a little bit. If you like what you hear today, please leave a review and tell a friend to tune in. We're a brand new show, so we are really relying on your support to help us grow. So without further ado, I'm excited to bring in today's guest. It is the incomparable, multi-talented, entrepreneurial Bob Lung. Bob, I was going to go through all the stuff that you do here, but this is only a 1-hour show. I don't know if we have time. It might be a better idea to ask what you don't do. But for those of you who don't know him already, he is the consistency writer, among other things, for Dr. Roto, the author of the Fantasy Football Consistency Guide, the award-winning Fantasy Football Consistency Guide, and the founder of the annual Fantasy Football Expo. I think founder is probably selling you a little short. I'm sure you're also the organizer, the booker, the everything. Yeah. Bob, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me. It's always an honor to be asked to be anybody's guest, so thank you for having me on, and looking forward to answer some questions, talk some fantasy football, and talk about all the fun things that I've got going on in my life to keep me not bored.
I can't imagine not only how you could be bored, I can't even imagine how you sleep. So in the context of all that stuff you do, man, it really means the world that you put aside some time to join us today and talk to our listeners. If anyone chooses to join us, you know, it's going to be worth your phone call. So 618-FANLINE, our phone lines are open. If you want to call in and join us, you can also leave a comment wherever you're watching us. We will see it here on the screen by the magic of technology. It will appear to us, and we will address your question. Even if you don't have a question, you want to just call in, shoot the breeze, talk some fantasy football. That's what we're here for the next hour. Bob, I'd really like to start off by introducing you to our listenership properly and taking an in-depth look at everything that you do, because you do provide such a wealth of content and resources for listeners and players. I don't even know where to start, man. I see you're writing for Dr. Roto now. I know that you do everything consistency for them, and consistency I think is going to be a big running theme of our episode today with you. You are truly Captain Consistency. So before we get into all of the areas where you create content kind of in that genre, why don't you talk a little bit about what consistency is, how you calculate it, how it's actionable, you know, how you apply it to your actions in fantasy football. What can listeners take away from it?
Well, I'll give you a brief history of how it got to that point too, because that's really, I mean, fantasy football consistency isn't new. I didn't create it. I didn't come up with it's my calculation, but everybody has their own opinion on it. I mean, Tristan Cogroff, back in ESPN, still with ESPN, he was writing, consistency stuff back in 1999. Basically, I've been playing fantasy football since 1985. And fast forward 17 years with the same 12 guys doing a touchdown only league, which we started in 85. In 2002, I had Sean Alexander on my team. He won the league MVP, and he rushed for 15 touchdowns, which was worth a lot of points in our league.
That is awesome.
And the thing was that he scored 5 touchdowns in one game, scored 3 touchdowns in another game, and 2 in another. So he scored 2/3 of his touchdowns in 3 games. The other 12 games, which was our regular season, he only scored 5.
Yeah.
So my team goes 7-7, but I'm the second highest scoring team in the league, and I was just livid. Like,
this is such a great like superhero origin story of how you fell into consistency.
And so,
I'm loving this.
By day, my real job is I'm a CPA. I'm an accountant. So, I'm a number cruncher. And so I'm like, all right, let's take a look at this. What the heck happened? So I figured out that if he would have just scored 1 touchdown every week and been more consistent during those 12, or scored those 15 evenly or a little bit more evenly over the 12 weeks of the regular season, that I would have won 2 more games, made the playoffs, and win the championship. And I'm like,
sure.
All right, well, that would apply to that league. I bet it would apply to, other scoring methods in other leagues. And so, again, just kept doing the data, doing the research. And what I found was, if you have more consistent players on your team versus those guys that at the end of the year are top 10 in total points, but yet are only hitting over the, I'll call it the consistency threshold for their position and that scoring method, 50% of the time, they're not helping your team. That's why you're 500 and you're top 5 in scoring. So that's where I kind of came up with the calculation and just kept pushing it, the envelope and from a, creativity. And, then I got friends who were into, database stuff and web design. And next thing you know, I've got live online reports that you can get on Dr. Roto. You can put in your own scoring method. It gives you the most consistent players in your league. And it just kind of exploded from there. And I just kept doing it for the love of doing it. It was helping my teams, and I shared that with others and wrote articles. And, as they say, the rest is history. And that's where I am, today.
Sure. It's a really important distinction. And you graciously acknowledge that there are a lot of industry experts who, have consistency resources and highlight it. But I think that a lot of casual players at the surface level might miss that in the, I think when you're newer to fantasy football, winning seasons, winning championships is about scoring points. And it's really a step beyond that. And it's about getting wins and making it to the playoffs, right? Because points do not always equate to wins. So I think it's important to look at how that is spread. And here on our show, we have a really wide variety of different guests from different walks of life, content creators, podcast hosts, writers, players. And some of them are numbers guys. Some of them are, X's and O's guys. And I think that it's important to feature a little bit of all of that because numbers in fantasy football are invaluable, but it's really important to put them in context, I think, and have conversation around that information, which is really why this show exists. We had Santiago Casanova come on last week from Roto Fantasy, and all we did was talk, numbers and trends and things. And that kind of stuff, when you key in on that and nobody else in your league is doing it, gives you such a precious edge in this game of mostly chance, but, informed chance, educated opinions. So that's what we're here for. And that's so cool, man. I can't think of a better reason to get into consistency than having been burned by a 15 touchdown season.
An inconsistent player, and then go, okay, how do I not do this? It's just like anything. We make a mistake. All right, how do we learn from it? How do we do better so that it doesn't happen again? And that's really what I was creating. And then it just, like I said, just kept getting bigger and bigger. And then the book idea came out, and it just.
Yeah, so how did that lead to the consistency guide? Just to give you a quick plug, it is published and for sale on Amazon, both in paperback and Kindle. I know it was nominated a few years straight for the Fantasy Sports Writers Association, the FSWA, as some people might know it. It won Best Publication in 2018, which is a big deal. There are some huge names on that winners list. I was checking that out this week. Was that the category it was nominated for each and every year?
Yeah, so they have a fantasy football publication, but it has to be printed. So it's not.
Oh, cool.
You can't submit a digital one.
Right, because there's also an online article category. Is that correct?
Right. There's all kinds of online ones, but this is for people that put out the thing. And yeah, every year I'm going against NBC Sports, CBS Sports. I mean, and I was
ESPN.
nominated 4 straight years and won in 2018. And I mean, that might have been the most just awestruck moment in my life. I literally just went, what? Because they called me. They do an award show on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio, and they always ask for your phone number. And like, okay, if you win, we'll let you know. And then about 5 minutes before you're going to come on, and
Jeez. No
yeah,
pressure.
and I so the first year I was like, no, I don't have a chance, and I didn't expect to, and then the second year came, and the phone rings, and I'm like, New York, what? And then it was like, hello, and they're like, hey, Bob, this is Derek from Sirius XM, and I go, yeah. He goes, you won. You're going on in 5 minutes, and I'm like, okay, cool, all right, yeah, call me back, because I didn't want to scream at that moment. Hung the phone up, I'm like, yeah. My wife's like, what happened? I said I won. And I have my trophy sitting right here behind me.
That's awesome, man. You might want to be careful how many podcasts you talk about that experience. It's really giving your friends ammo for potential pranks in the future, I think.
I'm sure. But, how the magazine came about was 4 years prior to 2015. I think I sent you the bio, the list of the magazines I had been printed in every year. So, people who were doing printed magazines were asking me to share, kind of put an article together, importance of consistency, and some players, 1 or 2 players from each position. And, obviously I was honored. Again, it was cool to be able to, go to a bookstore and like, hey, I'm in this one.
Oh yeah.
But I kept kind of asking the one guy, I go, hey, is there any way that we could put this data that I have and put it in the profiles with the players that you're putting in, and add that consistency information to each profile? They're like, oh, we just don't have enough room. Love the idea, but no.
Yeah.
So then finally, I did whatever it was, 2015-ish. I don't know, somebody told me, or I found it I don't remember. But anyway, somebody mentioned that, hey, do you know you can self-publish on Amazon? And I'm like, what? They're like, yeah, you just, type up your book and, make a PDF out of it, and you upload it and put a cover on it, and you can sell it. Okay. So I did. And, first year I sold, I told all my friends and family. So I think I sold, maybe 50 copies, something, I'm like, oh,
sure.
50 copies,
when you say anybody can publish on Amazon and sell on Amazon.
Yeah.
Anybody can publish it. You still have to sell it. Still have to move copies.
Yeah, somebody still has to buy it. Yeah. I mean, anybody can say, well, I'm a published author on Amazon. Well, yeah, and your dog can be a published author on Amazon. It's quite the way anybody buys anything.
Right.
And I was like, okay, 50. And then the next year I submitted it again, or next year I put it out. I don't know, maybe triple, maybe 150. And so then I saw that FSWA had this thing where they did, best fantasy publication. And so you have to mail the book to them, so they have the hard copy. So I mailed it to them and got nominated. I'm like, wow. That was, again, at that point, I'm like, okay, it's not going to get much better than this.
Sure. You'd think.
But that nomination, the next year, my book went to like 750 copies. And then in 2018, when I won, the next year it went to almost 3,000 copies. And now I've been floating between 2,000 and 3,000 a year. And people just, they love it, and they send me emails and thanks, Bob, I won my title again, or never made the playoffs, but I used consistency this time and got more consistent players, and went from usually being dead last to making the playoffs and almost winning those are the kind of stories that keep me going. It's not even, the money's nice, it's a nice little side income, but it's like all of a sudden I'm helping somebody with my ideas.
Yeah, you're providing something valuable for the community.
Yeah. And so, it just, every year people look forward to it. I usually try to put it out first. It's usually right after the draft, like May 1st, mostly because I don't write about rookies.
Sure.
They haven't proved anything in the NFL consistency-wise. So I can get it out right after the draft. And then I update it all summer, send out PDF updates if somebody wants it, and they use the tier draft list. And the Excel file, which kind of is my rankings based on consistency. And it's just been, still just kind of shake my head like, man, I can't believe I sell 2,000-3,000 copies of these a year. People actually buy it. They love it. And,
yeah, if you went back in time and told yourself it'd be, sitting on Amazon with 4.5 stars right now with multiple years of nominations and an award, I'm sure you would have thought you were nuts.
Well, it was funny. They had some, I wouldn't even go into the depth of it. Just say there was something in my community that I won this award for this Fantasy Football Expo. Okay. And one of the people who was the panelist that was asking questions about the event just happened to be a guy that graduated 2 years ahead of me from college. And so we knew each other. But we hadn't seen each other in, 30 years, 40 years. And he said to me, he goes, Bob, weren't you talking about fantasy football in '85 when you graduated, or after, those couple years after when we would have like alumni things together? And I go, mm-hmm. He goes, it's amazing. You're still doing this. And I'm like, well, I was just playing then, but yeah, I just kind of took it to a new level of whatever you want to call it. He's like, well, good for you for sticking to it and, just kind of going with the flow. And I told him, I said, because I started fantasy football before it was cool. By the time my product, my consistency thing was really in its kind of heyday there, over the last few years, it's because of where it's gotten. If I was starting today with it, I don't think I would have the same impact because it would take me so long. It took me so long to get this street cred that people would understand and believe and know that, okay, Bob's been around a while. He's not just a fly-by-night kind of guy, even though I've had those questions. Like, what's it like for overnight success? And I'm like, I've been
overnight,
for like 20 years, right?
Well, according to my wife, we are still in the period where fantasy football we're before it's cool. I don't think we've gotten there yet.
Trust me, when my wife and my young girls were, back in the, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I was writing and, didn't know what I was going to do with this stuff. And, my wife's like, are you making any money off these articles you're writing? I'm like, no, but hey, I'm writing for this big site, and maybe someday. And, and I remember, the eye rolls and but it's all changed now. Now she's like, oh, this is fun.
Yeah, it's always funny to put it in the context of non-players, but the industry has grown so much, since your early days. I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes to formats, to technology that comes with it, to the community as a whole, which I think is a good segue to talk a little bit about the expo. What led you to get that going? What's your experience been like running it? Tell us about it for people who aren't familiar.
Okay. Well, let me kind of back up to how we got to this whole weekend being created. So I've been to there's been numerous organizations, companies, people that have tried to put together fantasy football expos of some kind. I was writing for Roto Experts back in 2010, 2011. They put on one at the Atlantic City Convention Center. I mean, huge. Like, we're talking, big place.
That place is enormous.
The Tony Romo ones have been done down in Dallas. I didn't go to that, but I know people who did. And in all the cases that I was either part of it or know people that went to other ones, the thing that I felt that at first I felt it was a good thing to do. Mm-hmm. But the problem is that it was all about big money. It was all about big names, big stuff. Sure. Atlantic City was, and it was mostly, and I think Tony Romo was the same way. It was more about getting autographs and signed memorabilia. It wasn't, there was all kinds of fantasy people there. But that was the impression that I got of those events from afar, having not attended, the Tony Romo Expos. It felt very inaccessible, felt very top kind of 5-10%. Whereas, that's the problem. Whereas the majority, I think, of the fantasy football community is the rest of that sort of 90% of not only industry experts, but players who are in positions where they can go blow that kind of money on the top of the top. There needs to be a more accessible option. Right. I mean, I looked at, and one of the people from that organization, somebody gave my name and they reached out to me about being an exhibitor there. And the cheapest booth was $1,200, and it was in the back of the building, like back of the place. It wasn't, like if you went anywhere near the front of the building, it was $2,500. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. And I'm glad I didn't, because they said there wasn't very many fantasy people there at all. So anyway, 2019, or let me take a step back. So the other reason this all came about was living in Canton, Ohio my entire life. One of the other things I've also seen and have recognized from afar, I guess, or right in the middle of it, is I've watched the Hall of Fame weekend grow from a one-day event, a two-day event of, watching them do the induction on the steps of the hall with about 200 people sitting on the lawn watching it. The Hall of Fame game being in a high school stadium with medal stands with my dad, my grandfather, and, to now a 5-day event with concerts and 30,000 people in the stadium for an enshrinement and, big stage and big fanfare. And so as I got more deeply into the fantasy world, and especially kind of in this expert role or more recognized person in the industry, I always said, man, we really should have like fantasy football's greatest weekend, like we have football's greatest weekend with the Pro Football Hall of Fame. We've got the place, we've got the hotels, we've got everything here.
Sure.
Let's just do it the week after Hall of Fame. And so I knew that I wanted two things out of that weekend. One, I wanted to be sure that we had the biggest, most sought after fantasy football expert competition in the country. And then I wanted an expo the next day. But I knew that I needed to do the competition first because I needed to get those people to town.
Yeah.
So
makes sense.
let me think here, go back 4 years. So 17.
I thought you were a CPA.
Yeah. That's easy. So anyway, about 4 years ago, I sent an email to Mike Clay, who became a friend of mine from ESPN. And I said, Mike, look, we really don't have, baseball has these big competitions, best of the best, and they meet up in New York. And like the year that it kind of really clicked for me is I was listening to Fantasy Sports Radio, and they were talking about they were doing their big baseball expert draft in the locker room of the Staten Island Yankees. And they all had like their names on the lockers, and it was just sounded so cool. And I'm like, so I emailed Mike, and I go, Mike, look, I don't know if you heard, saw they had the Tout Wars and how they did it. And I said, we really need to have a best of the best competition. And I said, here's my idea. Let's do it live at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. There's an area in there called the Gold Jacket Lounge. It's a private event area. I said, we can have it in there. Let's get SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio to come and do it live like they do for baseball. And I said, what do you think? And so within 5 minutes, he forwards me an email that came from Brad Evans, who said the exact same thing to him. We should have this national competition, best of the best experts, but we just need a cool place to have it. Exactly what the last line was. And Mike wrote, I think you two should talk. And that's how the King's Classic came about. And that started 4 years ago. And so that's got the guys in town on Saturday to do the big draft. And we have SiriusXM every year live broadcast. In fact, the first year we did it, we had hashtag King's Classic trending on Twitter in the middle of the day from so many people listening, so many people following this big draft, because we have everybody, ESPN, CBS. I mean, you name a top expert. If that person's not there, somebody from their organization's there. I can guarantee it. So
sure.
So that came about. Then I said, okay, now that we got this rolling, now we need to do an expo the next day and make a weekend out of it, like Hall of Fame does. Yeah. And so 2019, this was after these guys, a bunch of them had come back from the Tony Romo thing, talking about how expensive it was and how, it's just all the complaints. And I said, well, all right, let's just do one in Ohio. Let's do one in Canton. Let's do the next day. We're all here anyway. They're like, okay, go ahead. So I did. So within 3 months, I put together the first Fantasy Football Expo in 2019. We had about 75 people. I didn't lose any money. I didn't make any money, but I didn't care. People loved it. They thought it was cool.
Now, when you say people, I'm going to segue here to one of our mailbag questions that I thought was interesting.
Oh, okay.
Steve in Florida wants to know, is the expo open to fans or just industry experts? So I guess what he's wondering is this a place where fans come to interface with experts, or is this a place where experts kind of huddle up and network and things like that?
The official answer would be yes. All
to both.
It's everybody. And that's what's cool about it. Everybody who's come as a fan, we're like, oh my gosh, I got a picture with Marcus Grant from NFL Network, and I got a picture with Michael Fabiano and Mike Clay and Brad Evans and Andy Behrens from Yahoo, and they're so cool and they're so nice and they're so friendly. And I'm like, yeah, I know, because I've known these people for years. And that's what's awesome about our fantasy football community, is that there are zero egos, zero. Yep. Mike, an Andy Behrens will talk to you or me like he'll talk to Brad Evans. I mean,
well, I'll tell you what, man, I can speak to that, because coming into this year, my biggest concern starting a new show from scratch and really a new idea that I noticed that nobody else was doing. So there was really no proof of concept. And I was able just through networking over Twitter to book an entire season's worth of guests. And I'm thinking, man, all these people are just agreeing to come on the show. They don't know me. They don't know, the concept. I could have been anybody. I could have been a crazy person, but here we are. Here you are on the show. I've got people coming on every Saturday who I, respect, and I've been consuming their content, for months, yourself included. It's really been an eye-opening experience for me to set foot into the industry space and be so openly welcomed. I mean, honestly, if I had reached out to people to book this, and if you or if other people had not responded, or maybe implied that this was a bad time to get into the industry, or the show wasn't a great idea, I wouldn't have done it. But that's not what happened. So
no. The interesting thing about the 2019 Expo was it was the first time that a lot of the experts at the, I'll call it the RB2 level, got to interact with the RB1 level. And all of a sudden, they were all thanking me months after, like, Bob, it was so cool, because I asked Mike Clay, or I asked Andy Behrens, or I asked this person or that person to come on my show, and they said yes. I never even would have had the balls to ask prior to that. Like, who are they to let come on my show? Who am I for them to come on my show? They're like, they came on. I had like top 3 guys in the and I'm like, yeah, that's how we roll. I mean, we're not, we're all having fun doing this together, Yeah. So,
I mean, half of it is getting the courage to ask, but the other half is the accessibility. And you really provided a networking avenue for these kind of new industry voices, and put them in a position that they never would have found themselves in otherwise. I mean, fantasy football isn't a huge industry, but it is a big enough industry that the top of the top are, the top of the top is not, as readily accessible as they may have been, 10, 15 years ago by writing a letter or to picking up the phone.
Well, yeah, obviously, the internet and social media and all that kind of stuff makes it a lot more accessible. But so then 2020, of course, nothing happened. We're all trying to write that year off. So 2021 came, and I got kind of lucky that kind of in the middle of the summer in August, everything kind of was just on a hold. No, we weren't going the wrong direction again, like we are now again with this mask and stuff. But anyway, so, I decided, okay, we're going to do 2021. Everybody's going to be vaccinated. We're all going to be good before August. Let's go forward. And, I said, what my expectations were. I'm like, well, if I double it to 150 people, cool. Maybe we'll get 200. I don't know. I don't know what to expect.
Sure.
Well, long story short, we had over 500 people attend.
I hadn't heard that number. That is crazy.
We went over 500 that day of people coming in off the street, but between exhibitors, fans, 500 people.
People were ready for live events again, and to see people.
They were. I mean, and I said to somebody, I don't know if it's the being cooped up or if it was, but I said, either way, the hype was off the charts.
Yeah.
What was amazing was the whole weekend went about as perfect as I could ever imagine, probably even better than I could have imagined. So now we're looking at 2022. Again, I'm going to be cautious and say let's double it to 1,000. But that's 1,000 people.
And you're penciled in for August, yeah? Again?
August, yeah. So the weekend of August 13th and 14th. It is not open for registration yet. We are working on a new website in the background so that we can handle the amount of people, improving it, make it bigger, better. But yeah, our goal is to do a lot of cool things. We have a Friday night party, a Saturday night party. The one party was at what's called the Centennial Plaza in downtown Canton, which was built for the 100th anniversary. That was super cool. It was a perfect night. Everybody hung out. They're giving away, we had souvenir cups, we had cigars, we had alcohol, just everything. And everybody talked fantasy football. So,
well, I'll tell you what, man, I've been to a few live podcast events for some of my favorite content creators in the past, and those were some of the coolest experiences that I've had playing this game. I think that there's a definite want for that, a definite need for that. It's another reason why this show exists, is to kind of give people an avenue to connect with their favorite content creators, and really get at that next level of personal interaction that they don't necessarily get out of writing in, mailbag questions and things every week. But I can't imagine any, self-respecting fantasy football enthusiast looking at something like the Fantasy Football Expo and not thinking that it sounds like the coolest possible weekend that they could ever have.
For those who are either married or have significant others, we all know how many trips you have taken with your spouse, significant other, that you may or may not have really wanted to go. I feel like guys are always looking for the ultimate guy road trip, and whether, a lot of it will say, well, it's Vegas. Well, yeah, okay, I get it. I understand that. But I can't tell you how many people made last August and this August are already planning for this year's guy road trip, because it's, you get there Friday night, we party, we have drafts all day Saturday, we party for Saturday night, we have the big expo on Sunday. We'll probably drink on Sunday night too. Many people stayed 3 nights and enjoyed the town and loved everything. And, the nice thing about Canton, it's not a big city. Like, you can go from one end to the other in 15 minutes. Right. So, you're not far away from anything. And there are things for wives to do and spouses. And, we're even looking into ideas of maybe doing things during some of those events where they can go and do their thing. So we're trying to, make it into a destination thing. I mean, I've got the backing of the bureau, the convention bureau and the visitors bureau here in town, and they love the idea. And, because again, there's not many guys trips. If you go through a visitor's guide in most towns, it's, winery here and this there, and,
Yeah, I think that there's a kind of a mainstream stereotype of what a typical guy's trip would be. And I don't know that that's really reflective of if you actually sit down with a selection of guys and say, what would your dream weekend look like? It's going to depend really on what they're interested in, what they're passionate about. My bachelor party, my friends took me on a trip to Chicago. I had never been, but I'm a huge Bears fan. I live in New Jersey. And we went out there, and we, might not have had the most typical bachelor party trip. We went to a magic show. We toured Soldier Field. We did karaoke. Right. I actually sat on the airplane on the way out there. A buddy of mine stood up and announced to the plane that was my bachelor party trip. And the woman next to me turned and said, are you going to go out there and do, strip clubs, anything like that? And I was like, no, I'm a little nerdier than that. Here's kind of what we have planned. She was like, oh, well, I am a stripper. So if you change your mind, let me know. But I could see her just looking at me with disappointment as I explained what we had planned for the weekend.
Wow. Talk about in your lap, right?
Yeah, and the woman in front of us turned around and was like, yeah, me too. And I was like, what is this airplane? What is Chicago? What am I getting myself into? But I'm going to take a detour here for a second. We actually have our first call of the day coming through. Cool. So I'm going to bring our caller on. Hey, caller, you are on Fantasy Fanline. Welcome to the show. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Horseshoe Devotee.
Oh, my. Horseshoe Devotee. Welcome to the show, buddy.
Yeah, your resident Colts fan calling back. It's been a couple weeks.
You know,
Team's been struggling due to some injury.
Horse, it is so funny that you call. Bob, Horse and I know each other. And Horse, I don't know if you were listening the last minute or so while you were on hold. Could you hear the show?
No, I couldn't. I was getting all the rules of calling and not using profanity.
Good. Yeah. Well, first of all, I hope you were paying attention to those rules. But secondly, I was just telling the story of the bachelor party trip that I took to Chicago and went out and, toured Soldier Field and did all sorts of other nerdy things. And the airplane experience that we had on the way there, where we were with a couple of strippers. Bob, the friend of mine who I referenced who stood up and made the announcement that it was my bachelor party, I believe was Horse.
Nice.
That was, I didn't know how to handle I thought that was all Chicago was going to be.
Yeah.
Well, based on the information we had on that plane ride, that was the correct assumption.
Guess so.
Yeah, those are the only two we met the entire weekend.
Well, Horse, what can we do for you on the show today, man? You got a question for Bob?
Yeah, I kind of want to know if there's anything to Dearness Johnson. Was this a one-time thing with Nick Chubb out, or is there something more to it? I'm starting Christian Kirk in my flex, and I'm pretty confident with, using him this week while I have some guys on bye, but is there anything to maybe picking him up as a third down back and seeing, if there was anything to that first game for him?
I mean, so, obviously the only reason he's even seeing the field is because Kareem Hunt has been hurt and Chubb's been in and out with injuries and COVID. He's a very good back, as we saw against Denver that one week where they played on Thursday night. And I think the reason he's there is because, if I'm not mistaken, Hunt is, I don't know if he's done in a year or so, contract-wise, and may not get re-signed because he probably will want more money. He's a good back. The problem is, if they were playing a high-powered team, like a high-powered offense like the Chiefs or somebody like that where they might need him to be more involved on a passing standpoint, I would say wouldn't be a terrible idea, even though I think Christian Kirk's still a better flex. But they're playing the Lions this week. If they aren't ahead by 21 points by halftime, I'm going to be very disappointed. And Chubb will score 2 touchdowns. Now, Johnson could get some cleanup, late fourth quarter if they've got a big lead. So, I mean, there's potential. I still think as long as D-Hop is out, Christian Kirk is the better flex, regardless of who's quarterbacking, because I think he's put up either 2 or 3 straight clutch games, consistency-wise. So he's been playing very well recently with Hopkins out and, Colt McCoy being the quarterback. Murray may or may not play. That's still up in the air. So I think I would stay with Kirk. If you have Chubb or you want, Johnson as a backup or you've got the depth, pick him up, put him on your bench. Who knows what can happen. I mean, Chubb's been up and down when it comes to injury stuff. So, but yeah, I think Kirk's your better choice for this week for sure.
Yeah, Horse, you got the right expert here. Bob is in Ohio. He's a Browns fan. He's probably more tuned into that situation than anybody. Bob,
I'm actually on vacation in Ohio right now.
Oh, no kidding.
Sorry, why?
Yeah.
Why would you be on vacation?
I love the city of Columbus.
You're in Columbus.
I love the city of Columbus.
Game? Okay. You're a Buckeyes fan?
Actually, no, just I'm here for a concert. But I love the city, and I wanted to take my girlfriend to see it because I had such a great time here the last time I was in town. I did go to a Buckeyes game the first time, but where am I staying?
No, who are you seeing?
Churches. The band is called Churches.
Oh, I love them. They're coming through the tri-state area soon.
Okay.
Yeah.
What kind of music? Indie?
So,
yeah.
They're indie alt pop, synth pop.
Oh, okay.
I guess.
I'll have to ask my daughter. My middle daughter is kind of into that kind of stuff. Like she'll like bands, and then a year later, like she was like, I like this band named Mumford and Son. It was like 5 years ago. I'm like, oh, okay, cute. And then all of a sudden they're huge.
Hey, Horse, is that the tour with Donna Missile?
That is.
Old friend of ours from the Central Jersey Rutgers scene.
Nice.
Yeah. So can I ask something else as far as Christian Kirk is concerned?
Shoot.
Yeah. going forward is especially, with D-Hop and injury concerns, is Christian Kirk, I don't trust Jerry Jeudy or Teddy Bridgewater, and I'm just so nervous every time I put Jerry Jeudy out there. Is Christian Kirk someone I should be thinking about, or am I overthinking it?
No, he definitely. I mean, so like I said, from a consistency standpoint, 4 out of his last 5 games, he's earned a clutch game, which means he's scoring over 11 points a week. If you can get that out of your flex player, if you can get a consistent flex player as your wide receiver, that's golden. I mean, I would stay with Kirk, because even when D-Hop comes back, AJ Green's, one step in the grave. I mean, he can't stay healthy. He's old. He'll play 1 good game, 2 good games. I mean, the key is for them, obviously, to get Murray back so that they can, be a little bit more dynamic from an offensive standpoint. But, Kirk has definitely proven his worth. I like Kirk. I would have drafted him if it wasn't for AJ Green being there. I really was high on him going into the year, and then they went out and grabbed Green. I'm like, why? But
too many potential mouths to feed.
So it kind of hurt Kirk early on, but I think the Cardinals are starting to realize that, they'll let Green walk this offseason, and Kirk will be the main guy, and then maybe they'll go get a third receiver or somebody. But I like Kirk a lot.
Well, for some context, we don't know for sure what the injury situation is going to be at game time tomorrow, but just based on the news coming out, I would expect Kyler Murray to give it a go and Hopkins to be out. So if you're gonna lean into Christian Kirk, this is probably the week to do it.
Okay. Yeah, that's the smart thing to do. I tend to overthink.
Do you not see Rondell Moore as the potential kind of?
I knew there was somebody. I do, but man, I don't know if you've seen some of the games. Like, he's made so many mistakes.
Yeah.
That one game I was watching, I think he fumbled a punt return, then fumbled on the next offensive series.
Yeah, I remember that exact game.
Dude, you're not going to keep a starting job. You can have all the talent in the world. You keep fumbling the ball, nobody's going to let you play.
Yeah.
So he's got to get through a lot of just young issues. But, Kirk started off that way too. He wasn't well polished.
Sure.
Everybody had a lot more love and faith in him. So I think that, like I said, especially moving later this year, I think they're both very talented. I think Rondell Moore has definitely got a little more speed too, but yeah, he'll be the third receiver future. I totally forgot about him. I don't know why.
That's what I'm here for, Bob.
Good.
Look, Christian Kirk is not the talent that Jerry Jeudy is, but at the end of the day, I want more pieces of that Cardinals offense than I wanted the Broncos offense. Yeah. So I think that's the right move. Just to kind of circle back to Dearness Johnson for a second, Bob, I want to pick your brain a little bit on that 2 running back system that the Browns have. Is that more of a product of the fact that they had 2 elite starting running backs all year in Chubb and Hunt, or is that the system that they want to use regardless of who that second running back is now that Hunt is out? Are we going to see Dearness Johnson in that role? Because when we've seen Johnson have big games this year, it's been really without any of those 2 starters ahead of him. So I think this is kind of the first good look we're going to get at the Chubb-Johnson split experience, and I'm wondering how much of that is a product of the system or how much of it is just necessitated by Kareem Hunt is too good for us to not get on the field. Not that Dearness Johnson isn't good. I think that's an important distinction. Like, he wasn't just seeing work because, nobody else was ahead of him. He was also legitimately good with his touches.
I mean, the Browns know what they have. They have, one of the best, if not the best, run offensive line. They want to keep those backs fresh, and they want to keep Chubb alive. And it's a long season. I think Johnson becomes Kareem Hunt, but he's not Kareem Hunt. So,
sure.
Where if Kareem Hunt's there, maybe they're splitting 50-50. That's going to be more 70-30. And, so maybe Johnson could get lucky and catch a ball out of the backfield, inside the 10 on third down and maybe take one in. But I think you're better off. I mean, if you have nothing better, or you're in a deep league with a lot of flex spots, maybe Johnson's still playing. But in a typical 12 team with only one flex, I think he probably isn't.
So in other words, it's not a one-to-one transition. The Hunt role doesn't become the Dearness Johnson role, but at the same time, Chubb doesn't become Derrick Henry and just get 100%.
No, he's not going to He's not going to get 30 carries a game because it's just not a good idea.
Okay, I guess we'll see how that plays out. Horse, any follow-up?
It's supposed to rain all day tomorrow here in Cleveland, so I'm expecting a lot of run, short passes. So.
Horse, your thoughts? Any follow-up questions, comments?
No, that's. I appreciate that. He's still sitting on the waiver wire, and I'm thinking I should just pick him up, just to kind of, see
I think
what's going on.
The
issue is
legitimate question about starting him, but I definitely don't think he should be on waivers.
Right.
Yeah, it's just there's so many there's so many players on my team that are on bye this week. So many of my legit starters that I'm nervous to drop someone.
Well, maybe the conversation becomes, how is your record? If you're looking good for playoffs, maybe you hang on to your starters who you're going to need for the long haul. But if you need immediate production, maybe.
So in this league, I'm currently in third. I'm playing the first place team this week, but I'm without Stafford. I'm starting Derek Carr, which I like Derek Carr's matchup this week.
Yeah.
But I'm also, I'm benching Higbee because Higbee's on bye, and I'm thinking maybe I drop Higbee for Dearness Johnson. I mean, I have Jared Cook. I've been kind of playing matchups between Jared Cook and Higbee.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be interesting, I think, to see how the Robert Woods role vacuum shakes out in LA. There's a world where Higbee sees an uptick in usage, but I'm not expecting that, especially not with Odell Beckham Jr. coming to town. I think that's going to kind of shake out between Van Jefferson and OBJ. I'm okay dropping Higbee if you need immediate help from Dearness Johnson. I don't think that he's somebody that you need to hang on to at the sake of inconveniencing yourself. He's not in that tier for me of tight ends.
No, he's not, but I think if Jared Cook goes down, well, I mean, I guess it depends what your waiver wire looks like for other tight ends. If you don't have if you have a pretty shallow bench and you've got 4 or 5 guys you can choose from, like if there's a Tyler Conklin and Dawson Knox and those kind of guys sitting on the waiver wire now, dropping Higbee's not that big a deal.
Dan Arnold potentially.
Pick up one of those guys at some point.
Yeah.
But if it's, if you have a deep bench and there's not a lot of choices, then I actually think I'd keep Higbee and let Ernest Johnson sit there.
It's a good point.
Yeah. I mean, it might not be worth the risk of, Dearness Johnson just, being a one-time one. I mean, how many one-week wonders have we seen?
Well, yeah. Well, and I mean, again, I think he's talented. I think if he played every week, he'd actually be probably be an RB2 in our league, in most leagues. But Hunt's supposed to be back next week, officially. They thought about this week, but I think because of the rain, they decided to, and it's Detroit.
And the matchup, yeah.
Yeah, so I think they've decided to kind of push that one off. And then if I'm not mistaken, then they play at Baltimore. Then they have their bye in week 13. So we may not see Hunt. We may not see Hunt even. We might see Hunt next week for Baltimore because that's a big game, that can really be very crucial in the AFC North. We might see Hunt next week against Baltimore, and then he can take a week off to rest. So,
a lot to think about, Horse. I hope this helps. Good luck to you. Appreciate the call.
It was very helpful.
Yeah, good questions as always. We're gonna let you go. We just got another call coming in. So, Horse, I'll talk to you soon, buddy.
Thank you, guys. Great job. Yep, great job, guys.
Our pleasure. Talk to you next time.
Bye.
Bye. There you have it. First call of the day. We got another one coming in, so we're going to keep it rolling here.
Cool.
Hey, caller, you are on the air with Fantasy Fanline. Welcome to the show. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Greg, how you doing? This is Joe from Boston. I call in every couple of weeks. How you doing, Bob?
Good. How you doing, Joe?
I'm doing good. I'm in a bind, so you guys are my Saturday afternoon Safety valve. I am in a deep league. I have a who do I start, and I really want to get Bob's consistency guide on this. So it's a 3-flex deep 12-team league, half PPR. This is one of those competitive things ever, and so I need 3 flexes. I've got a couple guys, but the Antonio Brown injury is putting me out on a limb here. So my opponent already started his 3rd flex. It was Kyle Pitts. He got about 3 points, so I have some flexibility here.
Nice.
I need to just match that, maybe beat that, and I have 3 guys. You guys tell me who I should go with. Do I go Dalton Schultz against the Chiefs? Do I go Eno Benjamin? Or 3rd, I just picked him up, Trey Sermon.
Oh.
What are we looking at here? Not great, right?
Whew.
That's some bottom of the barrel stuff. These are the situations where I'm grateful to have an expert guest who I can turn it over to and get his initial reaction while I collect my thoughts.
Okay. Yeah, that's wow. But you know what? I'm
telling you, Bob. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Our Kings Classic League, we start 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, and 3 flex. And trust me, that league is a lot like what you just talked about. Like, like you're scraping the barrel. Like, oh, this guy has a heartbeat. I'll put him in. Schultz started off on fire, and then has really cooled off since. But the reason I probably like him the best is, 1, they're playing the Chiefs, so you're going to have a lot of offense. Number 2, Amari Cooper is out this week because of COVID. So now you've got, and CeeDee Lamb is injured or has been injured, so he's not 100%. They do get Gallup back, but they basically don't have a 3rd receiver, and that would be Dalton Schultz. So, I mean, Benjamin's a decent backup behind Connor, but, you're really rolling the dice on that one. Trey Sermon, maybe if Mitchell doesn't play, he might get some love, but they have not. They do not.
Yeah, I don't think so, man.
In San Francisco. I remember when I drove John Lynn's for Hall of Fame weekend, and we were talking about the running backs, and I asked him which ones he liked the best out of Mostert and Mitchell and Sermon. Sermon was definitely 3rd, obviously we didn't. Well, I guess we all should have known Mostert would get hurt within a week, but Mitchell's been certainly the better play, but. I think in this situation, I think you're in good shape with Schultz for this week because of Cooper out and because of the game script. It's going to be a lot of offense.
Yeah, I think that's the right answer. Trey Sermon would have been interesting to me prior to Jeff Wilson coming back from IR. If Mitchell was out and if Jeff Wilson was not around, Sermon, I think, would have been worth a dart throw because we've seen him.
Left, right.
Yeah, when they have nobody else, we've seen them reluctantly kind of lean on him in that running game, and he was okay in that role, but they've made it really clear that he is the last resort option on that team, and I think that even with Jeff Wilson being 1 or 2 games back from IR, he's really going to be the guy in that backfield this week, assuming Mitchell's out, which he might not even be. Benjamin, kind of interesting. Probably not enough that I'm going to trust him before I really see something out of him. I think that Schultz is a good enough option that I would roll him out there. I'm not usually a big fan of flexing tight ends, but in this situation, like you said, can't ask for a better matchup, better game script. Amari Cooper being out, I think, is huge for him.
Yeah, Amari Cooper wasn't out. This would be a different conversation. We might be leaning towards Benjamin, but
100%.
This week, because of that, you definitely got whether you call it lucky or whatever you want to call it, but you've definitely got a more positive game script there than you would with
Joe. Is this a PPR league? What's the scoring format?
It is half PPR, and I'm going against Kyle Pitts, who already played and did horrible, so I have a little bit of flexibility there. Schultz could work.
I think with the half PPR format, Schultz probably has the safest floor and also the highest upside in this case because those 2 running backs could just disappear. They could completely be non-factors in those games, and you're left with nothing. So I think Schultz is the answer here. I'm glad we talked through it and we figured that out.
All right, I'm in. All right, I have one more question, but I just wanted to say that's amazing insight, Bob, about the San Francisco backfield. I feel like this could be, one of those random weekends where Trey Sermon gets like 10, 15 carries. You never know. So it's you just spin the wheel with them. But no, I agree. Jeff Wilson Jr., Skinny Jeff, he's back. So now I'm in one other predicament, and then I'll hang up and listen.
Okay.
My Rams defense is on bye. So I just got a notification. Joey Bosa is going to play. Do you think the Chargers Sunday Night Football against the depleted Steelers could be a decent DFS start, or should I go with like Minnesota against Green Bay? I'll hang up and listen. Great show today, guys. Thanks again.
Thanks for calling, Joe. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, guys.
I mean, I think I heard today that Ben is back.
I was just going to bring that up. Ben Roethlisberger is playing.
Yeah. If that's your best option, yeah, I guess. I mean, here's the good thing. It is in Los Angeles, so it's at least home for them. That's always a good thing. Bosa definitely brings a lot to that defensive line, which will make Ben have to move around, which he can't. He has glacier-like reflexes, so he's not going anywhere. So it could be, the Chargers pass defense, especially against wide receivers, is actually one of the top 10. And actually against a quarterback, it's top 5. So in fantasy points given up anyway. So yeah, I think this isn't a bad start. I mean, outside of some of these games where like Buffalo, or who's Buffalo? Isn't Buffalo playing a bad team again? They always play a bad team. Oh no, they actually have no.
Oh, they got the Colts.
Oh, they got the Colts. Yeah.
Yeah.
So a horse would be. We'd hate us for people. But obviously anybody playing the Jets or the Dolphins or any of those kind of teams, certainly is a good one. But I think the Chargers is a good one this week. Like you said, with both. I would
have liked them a lot better against Mason Rudolph. The Steelers are interesting this year in the sense that they don't score a lot of points, so I think you have a pretty safe floor in a defensive matchup. But they're also not committing a lot of turnovers. That's not really how those game scripts are playing out. So I don't think there's a ton of upside for the Chargers to generate takeaways or maybe some potential for sacks. But like I said, if Mason Rudolph was in there, I think probably your odds go up for interceptions or forced fumbles behind the line. But
if you get a point for every sack, that could get you 5 or 6 points.
Yeah, and like you said, Ben's not getting out of the way of that pass rush. So I think that they're a fine play. Middle of the road, probably I would place them 10, 11, 12 on the week if I had to, and that's good enough to stream in a pinch. So like I said, pretty safe floor. Steelers are not going to go in there and drop 30, 35 points on them. They're going to hold them to a relatively low scoring game.
It'd probably be 17-14, something like that. 13-10.
I think your best hope is for the Chargers to pull away and really establish a big lead early and force the Steelers to throw, because I think that's where if Ben has to throw and they can't lean on that run game, that's where the mistakes are going to come and that's where the picks are going to happen.
Good point.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for the call, Joe. We are just about at an hour. We haven't even really touched the mailbag. There's just been so much to talk about. Bob, are you okay?
Are we done in an hour, or can we keep going?
We don't have to be. We could hang on a little late if you're cool with it, and we'll blitz this mailbag.
You got questions you wanted to answer. So.
Well, let's give the people what they want here. So just a reminder, our website, fantasyfanline.com, there is a mailbag form. You can go in anytime during the week and submit a question, and we will call it up here on the show. That is, of course, if you can't give us a call live, if you got something going on Saturday, if you work Saturdays, I'm sorry. But just a reminder, speaking of the mailbag and things, that all of these episodes are available in podcast format the following morning. So you can wake up, start your Sunday with our show, go through, listen to some insight, make some last-minute roster decisions. So Christopher in California wants to know, who did we let preseason narrative make us the most wrong about in drafts this year? I'm laughing at the phrasing of this question, but I know what he means. Who did we really let narrative in preseason hold more value on, and where did we get it wrong?
Well, so again, because of how I look at things, I always differ with a lot of other experts, just because, I'm basing it on consistency. They're basing it on whatever they're basing it on. So let me start with a guy that I was really excited about getting as a wide receiver 4 on most of my teams because of what he had done in the year before, maybe not necessarily preseason, but kind of going into the year. and that's Russell Gage.
I love that answer.
Because, when Julio Jones was missing those 7 games in 2020, he was like 6 out of 7 consistency-wise. They're like 70%.
Yeah.
And nobody was drafting him, and yet he was the number 2 guy behind Calvin Ridley. And I was like, he was on so many of my like 30 teams that I was like, okay, this could be great.
And the narrative factor, of course, there being Kyle Pitts coming to town.
Well, yeah. In fact, that's my next one. So, I thought for sure that even with Kyle Pitts, Gage is going to get 10, 12 points a game, be very consistent, and be a great, flex guy for me. And he's had how many zeros and how many 2s and just been brutal. The whole Falcons offense is a disaster other than Cordell Patterson. But to the other side, which is what kind of the general public, Kyle Pitts was the one that I just felt like, to me personally, again, I don't have a lot of faith in rookies from a consistency standpoint. I just could not buy into drafting a guy that high when I can draft Mark Andrews and Darren Wallers. And, Kelsey was still obviously going before him, but, Pitts was right up there in the top 3 with tight ends. And, and he's been okay. Yeah, he's 5th in total points, but his consistency is only about, 67%, which isn't bad. But if you would listen to the preseason narrative, this is the second coming of Kellen Winslow and, Travis Kelsey, and, this guy is going to light the world on fire. And
yeah, his positional ranking looks good right now, but you don't need a lot of production to reach that point, tight end 5, 6, wherever he is. And it's certainly not worth the draft capital that you would have had to spend to get him there.
Right.
We talked a lot about the Russell Gage, Kyle Pitts situation in the offseason. And my concern was, yes, Kyle Pitts can come in and be the best rookie tight end of all time and still not be worth what you're paying to get him.
Right.
Because he would have to be so far beyond, he would have to break records, not just by a little bit, but I was not going to bet on that. I was going to take the field in that situation. And I think we're seeing that play out, especially without Calvin Ridley there. I just don't think Pitts is ready to be the number 1 option in that offense. Whereas Russell Gage, I made that same mistake, man. The usage numbers from last year all seem to be telling one story. He was among the leaders in red zone targets last year, which I think probably very quietly. And it
so
just
I don't
hasn't.
know if it's the new coach. I know Arthur Smith came from Tennessee and he was all about Derrick Henry, and I get that. Maybe that was part of it because they definitely were trying to run the ball a lot with Patterson and Davis, and it wasn't working.
Well, that was the other preseason narrative, was how do you apply the Tennessee Titans offensive game plan to a situation where they don't, not only do they not have a Derrick Henry, but I think you can make the argument they didn't even have a serviceable starting running back as far as we knew.
Right.
We didn't know Cordell Patterson had found the fountain of youth and relevance.
Right.
But I think that's a great answer. My answer for this question off the cuff was Jamar Chase in Cincinnati. And I'm sure you have a lot to say about him, but the vibes coming out of the Bengals preseason were just disgusting. I mean, there were stories of Joe Burrow, not looking the same coming off the injury. There were weird stories about Jamar Chase's drops and the news item about him being, thrown off by the lines on the ball. And those are just things that you need to, the more you play the game and the more experience you get, the more you learn to discern stories like that from actionable kind of preseason stories. And I think that a lot of people were scared off of that entire offense by those stories. I mean, Jamar Chase's ADP, he went wide receiver 26, 71st overall in the back of the 5th round. I saw him go a lot in the 6th. I mean, he's currently sitting at wide receiver 4 on the year. So he's probably going to be a 2nd round pick next year, which I think is right. That's where DK Metcalf went. He was the wide receiver 4 in drafts this year. So by that metric, we were off by about 53 picks on Jamar Chase as a community. And
and there was a lot of love for Jamar Chase. Sadly, I was kind of like, well, I don't think they'll totally give up on the rest of the guys. So I have Tyler Boyd quite a bit. That isn't working out that great.
There was a lot of love for Jamar Chase, I think, coming straight out of the NFL draft as a talent, as a prospect, after what he did in college and his history with Joe Burrow. But I think the narrative really shifted with those beat reporter stories coming out just about the offense not looking good and Burrow not looking the same and Chase not being able to catch the ball. And I'm like, dude's been catching balls and making huge plays his whole life. I mean, a couple weeks in preseason camp of him, maybe shaking off some nerves and dropping passes. I'm not worried about it. He didn't forget how to catch a football, regardless of the lines that were on it. So that is my answer. We're going to keep moving here. Got a few more questions to get through. Becca in Ohio represent. Maybe somebody you know. Should I trade James Robinson for Hopkins? I am 7-3. I'm pretty deep at running back, but I need help at wide receiver. This is an interesting one. What do you think, Bob?
I would say yes. I think it makes sense since you're 7-3. Yeah. You can, Hopkins isn't going to be back this week, but Robinson hasn't been 100%. He's been playing, but he's not 100% healthy, so he hasn't been as good as he was. And if you got the depth, that's the whole idea that's really the whole benefit of trading is trading your excess for help at a position you need help. And, on paper, you would say Hopkins for Robinson, it doesn't, everybody would think, man, you're ripping that person off. Now I get it because Hopkins is hurt. And so, if that guy's more desperate for the running back help to get him through this week, got to do what you got to do. And I definitely would do that trade.
Yeah. Again, kind of going back to the preseason mindset of draft capital, this would seem pretty lopsided. Given the first half of the season's production from both of those players, I think that I would not trade James Robinson for Hopkins in a vacuum. But I'm glad, Becca, that you provided this context because I think this is the only situation where I would do it. When you're 7-3, you're looking good for playoffs. You don't need immediate help. You're not going to trade for Hopkins and get production out of him this weekend, obviously, because he's hurt. But he's still going to be good down the stretch. It's a positional need for you. You can afford to wait on Hopkins. I don't know, exactly who you have at running back, but if you're deep enough that you can afford to spend James Robinson for an upgrade at wide receiver, I think you have to put your team in the position to win games, and having too many great running backs and not enough great wide receivers is not going to help you do that. So,
right. And there's a couple other things let me bring up too that she needs to remember when she's doing this. Arizona is off in week 12. So even if you get Hopkins healthy, you might only get him for 1 week and then he's off. Yep. But here's why you want to do the trade. Here's weeks 13 through 17 for Arizona. Chicago, the Rams, Detroit, Indy, and Dallas. Now, all of those teams.
Sounds delicious.
Outside of the Rams. And let's remember, Arizona back in, week 4, put up, 45 points on the Rams in L.A.? So they have their number. And so I think that would be a very good trade for you, especially as you roll into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think so too. I get the hesitation. Hopkins' game log has looked a little weird this year. And I'm curious to know your opinion on his consistency metrics. He hasn't broken 100 yards all season, which is wild for Hopkins. He's really been floating on touchdowns. I don't really see any reason that stops. I know that touchdowns aren't considered as sticky a metric as, targets, yards, catches, but in a high-scoring offense where he is the guy and he's going to be getting the share of those targets, I think that if there's anybody who's going to continue to score at a higher rate than normal, it's going to be Hopkins.
Yeah, no question. And, I feel like Arizona, Kyler Murray is becoming a smarter quarterback where he's not forcing the ball to the superstar kind of thing, and they're trying to win football games. I always say, be careful about the teams that are trying to win football games and not helping your fantasy team.
Yeah.
Because that quarterback is spreading the ball around, and, where maybe in the past they were forcing 10, 12 targets a game at a certain player, they may not be doing that because they're like, oh, wait a minute, this other guy's wide open all the time. Every time we try to force it to Hopkins. So, it happens, but I'd much rather, especially, because when you get to the playoffs, I won't say it's not about consistency, but it isn't. It's 1 week. And so, you want those Hopkins weeks where it's 2 touchdowns, 150 yards, big plays, kind of games, because that wins you a game in the playoffs versus a consistent 12 points. The consistency gets you the playoffs, then you need the big games to kind of get you through. through that. So I think this is a good trade, definitely.
Yeah, and this is a perfect kind of case study of that, because James Robinson is that sort of consistent back end running back 1, high end running back 2, who's not going to blow up, but he's not going to lose you a week. So I think you rode him long enough. You're at a place where you're probably looking good for playoffs. Go ahead and pull the switch and start prepping to win the playoffs rather than just make them. Hope that helps, Becca. We're going to hit a few more quick ones here. A fellow Bob in New York wants to know Devonta Freeman or Deonta Foreman this week as a desperation flex. Bob, I don't know if all you Bobs know each other. I don't know if you also have a Bob Expo that you run.
So Bob in New York, go to the Bob fan club on Facebook. It's all the Bobs. We're all there.
That is awesome.
There is a Bob club, fan club of some kind. Or hit me up on Facebook and I'll invite you.
Maybe that'll be your next expo. Bobapalooza.
Yeah, we'll have a Bob section at the expo. Devonta Freeman's probably my choice here because I think Latavius Murray still isn't 100%. I think there's a chance he'll play, but there's question that he may not. If for some reason Murray is 100% healthy, which again I don't think he is, then maybe you'd lean towards Foreman. But I think I'm going to go Freeman this week with Murray still not 100%.
Yeah, he is officially listed as questionable right now. I think even if he plays, he probably won't be 100%. I don't think he'll get his usual workload. I'm not sure if there is a usual workload in that backfield. He's probably going to be eased back into action. It's tough. Deonta Foreman has kind of a cake matchup this week. He's got Houston. The Ravens are playing my Chicago Bears. I could see the argument either way. I think. Yes, without Khalil Mack, rest in peace. He is out for the season. I am still coping with that news. If Freeman has the backfield to himself, I think there's an argument that you could go with him. He's been a serviceable enough flex, 10-plus fantasy points in 3 or 4 last games since Murray went out. Even with Murray back, you could probably expect that kind of usage. Deonta Foreman looks like the best running back on the Titans right now, next to the ghost of Adrian Peterson. Jeremy McNichols is ruled out. So I think it's closer than it probably seems at first glance, but assuming that we don't wake up to reports on Sunday morning of Latavius Murray active and 100% healthy and really good vibes coming out of there, I think I would probably go with Devonta Freeman. So pay attention to those reports. Andrea in Texas is wondering what cheap buy low wide receiver should we be targeting for the most upside right now? So kind of your best lottery ticket.
Well, right now I think definitely, and so I do an article every week, kind of a who's hot, who's not from a consistency standpoint. And the guy I would pick, I think there's really a 1A and 1B, but 1A is Elijah Moore for the Jets. He's put up 3 straight clutch games. He did nothing until those last 3 weeks. All of a sudden now he's definitely picking it up. Corey Davis could be back. That might hurt a little bit, but I think they've realized how much talent this kid has. They're letting him run end rounds and be more involved in the offense. So I like him a lot. And then my 1B is Darnell Mooney for the Bears.
That is so funny. I had those exact same 2 players, but in reverse order. But go ahead and make your case for Mooney.
Yeah, so Mooney, again, I think 3 out of the last 4, him and Justin Fields are certainly clicking now, which is what we expected. It's just taking a lot longer than we was hoping. So, yeah, I like both those guys, kind of a 1A, 1B for buy low. And hopefully the guys aren't Browns fan or Bears fans and Jets fans. So.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Mooney and not me, because it would have sounded like a homer pick if I brought him up. But since you already entered him into the conversation, I will expand on that. I mean, Fields is looking better every week, as you would expect, with a highly touted kind of rookie quarterback in his first year. They're supposed to grow and pass more the more they get comfortable with the offense and the more the game slows down for them. Darnell Mooney is already being used like the team's 1A receiver, which I don't think any of us saw coming in the offseason, including Bears fans. But he is leading the Bears in snap percentage at 87.1% and target share at about 25% over Allen Robinson. It's also a higher target share percentage, for reference, than Stephon Diggs, Justin Jefferson, DK Metcalf, Deontay Johnson, Michael Pittman. Obviously, the percentage that he is getting of that pie, it's a smaller and less efficient pie than those other offenses. But, assuming that those usage metrics kind of stay on track and Fields does develop and starts to throw more and score more points, there's a lot of room for upside based on that usage and chemistry. So Mooney's probably a guy you can grab off waivers in a lot of leagues right now, just because of the state of that offense. They're coming off a bye. Go get him.
Yeah, same way with Elijah Moore, probably in smaller leagues or not, not a lot of bench spots. He's probably available.
Or non-tri-state area leagues.
Yeah, right.
So Vincent wants to know, am I crazy right now for wanting to turn Darren Waller into like Dan Arnold and Michael Pittman?
Not only you're not crazy, I think it's brilliant. I would definitely do this if I were you. If you got somebody that wants Waller that bad, definitely give him up. Let me just throw out just numbers for Pittman alone, and then I'll do Arnold too. Pittman's 8th in total points, but he's also 80% consistent. So he is actually ahead of guys like Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Hopkins, Marquise Brown, CeeDee Lamb, all these players. He's got more consistency. So if you just got Pittman alone, I could get it for you. But Dan Arnold is a guy, again, he was in my who's hot this week because he's put up 3 straight clutch games now that he's kind of taken over as the tight end for Carolina, and now you've got, Cam there, and he's definitely been looking his way. So, if you can get Arnold to replace Waller, while that's certainly a drop-off, it is certainly not a big enough drop-off, or you're certainly getting a better deal getting Pittman on top of that. Like I said, I would do Pittman straight up if you had another, but if you can get Arnold too, and then having, kind of an extra tight end there for backup, I think it'd be a great trade if that's what you're looking to do.
I agree with you. Waller has not been the difference maker that you were expecting. I think when you drafted him, probably back of the 2nd, top of the 3rd, around that turn is where I saw him going. And I have shares of Darren Waller. I was bought in kind of for the first time ever on trying to get in on that top tier of tight ends this year, because I didn't see as many potential kind of mid to late round prospects as I had in years past, and that scared me towards the top of the pool. I think that anybody who took Waller is probably regretting it, not because he's bad. I mean, there's not a lot of guys with the week-to-week upside that Waller has, but I think that the days of looking at him as kind of one of those premium top 2-3 round assets, we shouldn't be viewing him that way at this point in the season. It just hasn't come to fruition. I mean, he had 19 targets in week 1 and hasn't really blown up since then. But I think that first impression of that week 1 really stuck with a lot of people who have not been rostering him and playing him every week and suffering through his kind of mediocre run here. So you probably could still get that elite tight end value for his name and maybe catch somebody who has not been paying as close attention. I mean, there's a lot of question marks on that offense right now with Henry Ruggs gone. I mean, we weren't seeing great production from Waller with Ruggs. And in one game so far, we have not really seen it without him to the level that you were hoping for. Sure, you could hope that maybe more targets are going to go his way, but you got to trade that for the value of those targets. I think that Ruggs probably did a lot of work taking the top off of defenses, opening up those kind of short, intermediate targets for Waller. I don't have a ton of confidence in Deshaun Jackson to accomplish that, so I would probably get out of the Waller experience if I can do so at a price like that. I'm not selling him just to get rid of him, because again,
you're getting a better deal here. I totally agree.
You're getting top 3 tight end value for him, and I don't necessarily think that that's where he should be valued. So go ahead and pull the trigger on that. Good question, Vincent. I'm sure a lot of people are kind of trying to figure out where to place Waller right now and what to do with him. We got one more question here. We're going to go out with a bang. This question is probably half a show's worth of material alone. We are at the end of our show here, so we're going to have to blitz it a little bit. But Piotr in New York wants to know, can you name your top 10 running backs and wide receivers in order for rest of season? I'm looking to make some moves ahead of the trade deadline. I get the question. A lot of trade deadlines are happening this week or next week. You should definitely, this is a reminder to take a look at your league settings. If you don't know when your deadline is, go find out right now. You don't want that to have passed without realizing it. And most commissioners should probably put out a public service announcement when that's approaching. But if you are looking to shake things up and go buy somebody, how are you arranging these players? Bob, you can give as much or as little analysis as you want if you want to just list them.
I may not be able to give you a top 10 in order rest of the season, but here's what I will say. If you're looking to make moves that help your team overall and not in specific ways. And like that trade with Waller, that's helping your team overall, because what you're doing is you're getting a decent replacement at tight end, but your improvement in Pittman over probably your third receiver or flex is going to help your team overall.
Yeah,
because Waller is okay, but Waller isn't winning you games. But adding Pittman and Arnold may be what you need to get you over that. So instead of giving you, the guys in order, here's what I will tell you. Here's what I'll share with you. So this is the top 10 most consistent running backs so far this season. Because this may kind of help you understand who's been consistent, and you may go, oh, I didn't realize that. So 89% is Austin Eckler and Naji Harris. They're tied for first. 88% Alvin Kamara. 80% is Jonathan Taylor. Now McCaffrey's 80%, but he's only played 5 games.
Sure.
78% DeAndre Swift, Cordell Patterson, Ezekiel Elliott, Henry, who's out, is 75. Chris Carson is out. He was 75. Chubb is 71. Cook is 71. Jacobs is 71. So there's kind of your top 10 from a consistency standpoint. So if you didn't hear a guy on here, that means that they're below that. Now, you can look at it and say, well, okay, maybe some of these guys are worth trading for because they've had a slow start or heading the wrong direction. And that's possible. So, a guy like maybe James Robinson or Connor or Elijah Mitchell, Antonio Gibson, Damian Harris coming back, Melvin Gordon, so some of those guys, Michael Carter's another one too. Kenyon Drake actually was 3 for 4 clutch games. Since Gruden's been fired, Drake is 3 for 4. Prior to that, he was 0 for 5.
That is a very important distinction. Changes in coaching and personnel mid-season.
So that's the kind of stuff that I'd rather share with you, because I can't predict the rest of the season. I can just tell you where we're at, what's happening, what's trending. So that's running backs. Wide receivers, Cooper Kupp 100%, Deontay Johnson 100%, even though he's 8 for 8, not 10 for 10. Deebo Samuel's 89. Devontae Adams, these are all 89%. Devontae Adams, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Stephon Diggs, DK Metcalf, Keenan Allen, Robert Woods was, and Hunter Renfrow is 89%. That could be a guy, too, that somebody may have, maybe not on their bench, but sitting in a flex spot that they don't realize how good he's been. Because his total points is only 26. But what he's doing is every week he's getting that 12 to 15 points to really help your team. So kind of like that Pittman-Arnold trade, you get a trade where you can get kind of a stud for stud and then have somebody throw in Renfrow, because that's going to help your overall depth. Past that, 80%, Tyreek Hill, Michael Pittman, Antonio Brown, Calvin Ridley, which, of course, those two are only 4 for 5. 78% Godwin and Mike Evans, 75% is D-Hop, and then, goes down from there. So, again, if you didn't hear your guy in there, that means they're under 70%. CeeDee Lamb, Adam Thielen, DJ Moore, Mari Cooper. So again, that's kind of stuff to look for. Also, if you go to drroto.com and you subscribe, all of this information, this chart, which has game-by-game consistency, is in my article every week as a subscriber. So that way you can see those trends. You can look at some players and go, ooh, this guy's went 3 for 3. Maybe I should go try and find him off somebody's team before, the playoffs or whatever. So
as well as a consistency, as well as a podcast, I believe, right, where you break down some of those consistency metrics from week to week.
Yes, and then I do a podcast, which is kind of also reiterating that kind of stuff, and that's part of the subscription program too. But it's all there. The consistency what I call the consistency model, consistency report, where you can put in your own scoring method and see who the most consistent players are so far this year under your scoring method. That's also very helpful. But I am working on a tool right now that's doing exactly what he's asking for, which means you can do a rest of season and it will show you the schedule and then how consistent they have been in those game scenarios, home versus away, good defense, bad defense. And it can kind of show you a projection of, who would have the best kind of setup for the rest of the year. Hoping to have that by the end of the year, and it'll be 100% then for next year. But because that's a lot of the questions I get is, hey, I need a waiver wire pickup for the next 3 weeks because this guy's hurt or on a, whatever.
Yep.
And that's what this tool will be able to do is you can go in there and say, hey, give me all the, it'll be an Excel file of here's all the quarterbacks. It'll show the schedule and it'll show what their, historical consistency, fantasy points per game and consistency rating have been in against those game scenarios that may help you looking out going forward, which is something I think has always been very important.
Super helpful.
I always wanted to have that too. So I'm having somebody work on that report to kind of help for that kind of thing. It's not necessarily projections. It's more projections based on history, I guess.
That's the best reason to build something, man. It's because you want to have it and nobody else has done it yet. So,
yeah, right.
That's how we all kind of get into this industry. I love all of that. I'm going to keep an eye out for that tool. The Hunter Renfrow note is such a great one because there are guys who are 26th overall in points at wide receiver who would sink your team in the flex position. And then there are guys like Renfrow who are going to not I don't want to say win you weeks, but they are going to give you enough at that position to allow your superstars to win you the weeks and not disappear in the weeks where your top guys don't perform as well. So that is a huge factor in roster construction and kind of week to week theory. I love that. I'm going to give a more traditional answer, and I am going to list my guys here. I'm going to plant my flag. And I'm going to go through them pretty quick. And if there's anyone that you want to elaborate on, maybe we can stop and talk about it. But I don't think it's any surprise that I have Jonathan Taylor as the top running back rest of the way. He's the running back one so far on the season, double-digit carries every week this year. He's getting at least a few catches every game, which I don't think that we were expecting with Nyheim Hines in that backfield. But I just think that Taylor is still such a young guy. I think that the older he gets, the more experience he gets, the more they trust him on passing downs, and you love to see that. And he's been dynamic with those targets. He's not just a guy who's catching the ball and getting a couple yards and getting tackled. He has 6 games with a carry of 20 plus yards this year. So he's making big plays. He's getting a ton of work. He looks great. I don't think there's a ton of room for debate. You could maybe flip him with Christian McCaffrey, who's my number 2. His stat line looks like old school healthy CMC in his 1 week back from injury. But we'll see. He's kind of got that unfortunate injury designation now moving forward. It has been a couple of years. What's that?
Him and Barkley, yeah.
And it's been a few years since we've gotten a full season out of McCaffrey, but that season was so good that I think that we all remember it and hope for a return to that standard. But I would still value him too overall. Naji Harris is my 3rd. And that might be surprising, but talk about consistency.
Yeah.
Good Lord. He's leading active running backs in carries so far in the season, and he's behind only DeAndre Swift in targets. There's not a really much stickier metric you could ask for than that kind of opportunity share every week. And I don't see it changing. He's got no less than 15 fantasy points since week 1. Been running back 1 in 8 of 10 games so far with only 1 RB2 finish. That first week was against the Bills was kind of a fluke. He busted in that game, but I think that coming out of that, people were afraid of his productivity moving forward. But what we really learned from it over the course of the season was that was more of a product of the Bills just being a really great defense. But, you learn that stuff over the course of a season. Got Dalvin Cook next, Austin Eckler, number 5. And the rest of my top 10 would be Nick Chubb, Zeke, Joe Mixon, DeAndre Swift, and Alvin Kamara, who I don't love putting all the way down at number 10, but just the ankle injury concerns. He's about to miss his 2nd week, and the team offense without Jameis Winston. Too many question marks for me, but I can't bring myself to drop him out of the top 10. He's just too talented. Anything jump out at you from that list?
No, I think, like you said, everybody's good there.
All right, I'll go through the wide receivers real quick. I got Cooper Kupp, number 1 overall. I think you can probably make a case for Devontae Adams or Tyreek Hill, but if Cooper Kupp by this point hasn't earned the top billing at that position, I don't think there's anything he possibly could have done to earn it. He could not have really had a better first half of the season. At some point, you have to put him over the bigger name guys who you expect to outproduce him and look at the reality of the situation. And that's that Cooper Kupp right now is the best wide receiver in football, or fantasy football at least. I think you can make the argument for both of them. But I have Tyreek number 2, Devontae number 3. I have Jamar Chase at number 4. His efficiency numbers have been a little weird the last couple of weeks. He's been 3 of 9, 6 of 13, but he's just been so productive, double-digit points in every game until last week, and I'm not afraid of him the rest of the way. I think he's earned top 5 along with Deebo Samuel, who is my number 5. George Kittle coming back, Brandon Ayuk gaining some more traction in usage metrics, but he's just still so good with the touches he gets. From there, I'm going Justin Jefferson, number 6, Diggs, 7. CD Lamb, I have at number 8, but I don't feel great about it. Marquise Brown at number 9, which I think probably people don't think of him as a top 10 option, but he's top 12 in targets, top 10 in yards and touchdowns on the season so far. He's on a high-scoring offense. He's getting more consistent usage. And I think he's kind of bucking the stigma of the boomer bust, small, speedy wide receiver. Him and Tyreek Hill kind of had to deal with that stereotype, and I think that they're both proving that they are number 1 options in their offense. A.J. Brown at number 10. My honorary mention would have been Keenan Allen, just because I really like his usage. He's 5th overall in targets. He's an elite talent, great quarterback. He's only got 2 touchdowns on 93 targets, which seems ridiculous. That seems bound to regress at some point to the mean. So I think he's leading in stickier metrics than like guys like Metcalf, Thielen, who you mentioned were not super consistent so far in the year. So that is where I'm at on that question. It's a big question. Yeah. We covered it as best we could. Any closing remarks you want to share with Piotr on that?
No, I think you got some good picks there.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm really planting my flag on the Hollywood Brown pick as a top 10 option the rest of the way, but I feel good about it. I think he's really taken a step this year. He's always been talented, but I think we've really seen a change in his usage in Baltimore. So that is the end of our mailbag. Bob, this was a blast, man. We've gone an hour and a half. Dude, thanks for coming on. This was a lot of fun. We'll have to do it again sometime in the future. Why don't you take a minute here at the end of the show to kind of replug everything you've got going on, let the people know where to find you, where to find your content.
Sure. So on drroto.com is where everything is at from a consistency standpoint for all that information. You can find me on Twitter at Bob_Lung. And then, of course, we'll be announcing, if you haven't followed, make sure you follow at the FF Expo so that when we make the announcements about registration and tickets and all that stuff, which should be early 2022, we're not sure. We're either going to be probably shooting for Super Bowl weekend, kind of a big kickoff. But if you want to be if you're a content place or website and you want to be an exhibitor, certainly reach out to me and we'll get your name on the list too, because we're certainly kind of getting that ramped up. But official registrations will all be early in the year. But make sure you follow us there. And again, Greg, thanks for having me. It was a great time.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man. I will be at the expo next year. I've already made up my mind. I was pretty close to coming out this past August. I really got this show started with planning and things and decided I was going to step foot into the industry probably a week before the expo this year.
Nice. Okay.
And that was when I became aware of it and its existence. And I had that moment where I sat down with my wife and I was like, listen, am I crazy for dropping everything in a week and going out to Canton and doing this expo? And she was like, kind of, only because we also have vacation coming up immediately after that, and you're going to take another week off from work. And I was like, that's a great point.
A lot of people kind of ran into the, oh crap, we have vacation or we got something going on. And every single one of them said, but I guarantee you I'll be there next year. Like, we will not schedule a vacation.
Yeah, well, what's nice is now I can plan around it and I can be there on purpose this time.
Well, and the goal is to keep it the same weekend every year, which would usually be the week after Hall of Fame, which is usually the second weekend. 13th, 14th, depending. But so that way people can kind of block that out and know, okay, well, if we're going to do that every year, we got to make sure we don't schedule anything during that time frame. So it's before school starts, late in the summer, so all baseball and stuff for kids and that, can get done. And yeah, so
it's perfect, man. We'll make it happen. I look forward to meeting you in person. I'm sure we will talk again between now and then. Can't thank you enough for coming on the show, ladies and gentlemen. That was Bob Lung, the best of the best. We will be back next Saturday and every Saturday this season. We have John Lanfranca from Fantasy Sharks next weekend. Looking forward to that. You can subscribe to us and stream Fantasy Fanline live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, anywhere you want to find us. You can stream us live every Saturday. You can also find us on your favorite podcast platform the day after every episode. Every episode, we drop our audio format Sunday mornings. You can also visit our website, fantasyfanline.com, for a full schedule of upcoming guests and to submit a question to our mailbag if you can't join us live. If you liked us today, please leave a review, leave a comment, tell a friend, support us on Patreon. We do have a Patreon, patreon.com/fantasyfanline, to offer some perks and to help us keep the phone lines open every week. People, thanks for tuning in. This was a blast. We will talk to you next time on Fantasy Fanline. Goodbye, everybody.